Hi, everyone. My name is Julia Thompson. I'm 27 years old, and for the first time in my life, I thought I finally had peace. After years of saving, endless overtime, and skipping vacations, I bought my own two-bedroom apartment. Small, quiet, and perfectly mine. Every inch of it felt earned. The second bedroom was my workspace, where I coded by day and read late into the night. Sometimes I'd sit there just breathing, listening to the hum of the city below, whispering to myself, "You did it, Julia. You made it." But peace doesn't last long in my family. Last Sunday, I was sitting at my parents' dinner table. The usual roast, the same chipped plates from my childhood, the same subtle tension that never really goes away. My father, Robert, was talking about traffic noise again, and my mother, Patricia, kept smiling at my younger brother, Ethan, like she was keeping a secret. Ethan, 25, was 7 months into a pregnancy situation that had turned his life upside down. His ex-girlfriend, Tara, had left as soon as she realized responsibility wasn't part of her future plans. Since then, Ethan had moved back home with our parents, working part-time at a daycare and trying to convince himself that everything was under control. When Mom cleared her throat and said, "We've been talking about the nursery situation," I smiled politely, assuming they were finally turning the old guest room into something functional. That assumption lasted exactly 30 seconds. "We've decided your guest room would make the perfect nursery," Patricia announced casually, slicing her roast as if she hadn't just detonated a grenade. I froze mid-bite. "I'm sorry, what?" Dad leaned forward, adopting his familiar voice of calm logic, the kind that always came before disaster. "Sweetheart, think about it. Ethan and the baby will need a quiet place to rest. Our house is right off the main road, and you know how noisy it gets. Your apartment is peaceful. Third floor, double-paned windows, sunlight in the mornings, perfect for a baby." Ethan nodded eagerly, a shy smile tugging at his lips. "Yeah, Jules, and your guest room already has that soft light. It'd be perfect. I can even work from home when the baby's sleeping." I laughed, not out of humor, but disbelief. "Wait, are you saying the baby will live in my apartment?" The look they exchanged could have been pulled straight from a documentary about family delusion. Patricia reached over and patted my hand like I was the one being unreasonable. "Well, of course, dear. Ethan needs peace and stability. You can work from your living room, can't you? Everyone does that now. This is about family. Sometimes we have to make sacrifices." "Sacrifices," I repeated, my voice quieter than I intended. "Mom, it's my apartment." Dad sighed, as though I disappointed him in some moral way. "We raised you to be compassionate, Julia. You've always been so independent, maybe too independent, but now it's time to be part of something bigger than yourself." Ethan's voice cracked with emotion. "Jules, you're going to be such an amazing aunt. I can already picture it. You coming home from work, helping with feedings, being there for us. It'll be like our own little family." Something inside me twisted. I wanted to scream, "It's not our family!" But the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I stared at the table as Mom began describing paint colors. Soft yellow, gender neutral, and soothing. "We saw the most adorable elephant mobile at Target today. It would look perfect against your walls." My walls, my home, my life, being redesigned without my consent. "Are you hearing yourselves?" I whispered. "I work from home 3 days a week. That's my office. You can't just—" "Oh, honey," Mom interrupted, still smiling. "Don't make this difficult. We're all on the same side." The rest of dinner blurred into background noise, the clinking of forks, the soft hum of conversation, Ethan's laughter. I just sat there, frozen, my appetite gone, realizing they weren't asking. They were deciding. Later that night, back in my apartment, I sat in my so-called guest room, my office, staring at the walls they'd already claimed. The faint sound of the city filtered through my window. My phone buzzed with new messages, links from Ethan. "Look at these cribs. Isn't this wall art cute? We can paint next weekend." I didn't reply. I just stared at my screen until the text blurred into white light. That's when the dread finally set in. They didn't just want to share my space, they wanted to rewrite my life, and deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my parents standing in my living room, waving paint samples while I sat there powerless. By morning, I decided I wasn't going to let that happen. I drafted a polite but firm text to our family group chat. "Hey, I've been thinking about what we discussed at dinner. I love Ethan, and I'm excited to be an aunt, but my apartment is my private space. I can help set up a beautiful nursery at Mom and Dad's house, but my guest room will stay as it is. Hope you understand. I hit send before I could overthink it. Minutes later, my phone buzzed. First from Mom. Julia, I'm honestly disappointed. Family isn't about locking doors and drawing lines. We thought we raised you better than this. Then Dad chimed in. You're being unreasonable. Ethan's going through a lot. You have 2 bedrooms. Why can't you share what you've been blessed with? And finally, Ethan. Wow, I didn't think you'd make me feel like a burden. Guess I was wrong about you. My hands shook as I typed a response, then deleted it. No matter what I said, I'd be painted as selfish. By noon, I'd convinced myself things might calm down once they had time to think. I was wrong. 3 days later, my phone rang. It was my apartment's management office. Hi, Ms. Thompson, said a cheerful voice. Just calling to confirm delivery for Friday afternoon. Crib, changing table, and rocking chair. I blinked. What delivery? Oh, it's under your name, but the order was placed by a Patricia Thompson. We just need to make sure someone's home between 2 and 6. I felt my pulse spike. Cancel it, immediately. When I called Mom, she sounded almost amused. Oh, good, they called. I wasn't sure you'd be home. Don't be dramatic, Julia. It's just a crib. Ethan's been so stressed. You want the baby to feel unwanted? Mom, you can't just... Sweetheart, relax. You're acting like we're stealing from you. We're family. That word, family, felt like a weapon now. I canceled the order, but the sense of violation lingered. And just when I thought I'd regained control, they crossed another line. Thursday afternoon, I came home early from work to grab a forgotten charger. The moment I opened my door, I heard voices inside. Laughter, movement, the faint sound of measuring tape snapping back. My heart stopped. I walked in to find Mom, Dad, and Ethan in my apartment. Again. The spare key I'd given them for emergencies was dangling from the lock. Mom was standing by my window, holding fabric swatches up to the light. Dad was on one knee with the tape measure, muttering numbers. And Ethan was sitting in my desk chair, scrolling through baby furniture on his phone. What the hell are you doing here? My voice cracked. Dad looked up calmly, as though I'd just interrupted a family meeting. Language, Julia. We're trying to figure out where everything will go. That desk takes up half the room. You don't need something this big, do you? I could barely breathe. You broke into my home. Ethan stood quickly, one hand instinctively over his stomach. Don't be mad, Jules. We just wanted to surprise you. It'll be beautiful. You'll see. Get out, I said quietly. Mom laughed. Oh, honey, don't be ridiculous. We're family. You act like we're strangers. I walked to the door, opened it wide. Out. Now. The silence that followed was heavy. Dad's expression hardened. That cold disappointment he used to give me whenever I dared to say no. Fine, he said at last. We'll leave. But you're making a mistake. Family is supposed to help each other. Mom sighed theatrically as she gathered her swatches. You've become so materialistic since moving out. It's sad, really. Ethan sniffled, whispering something about how I was ruining his pregnancy experience. I didn't respond. I just stood there, holding the door, my jaw trembling as they filed out one by one. When the door finally shut, I locked it. Then I slid to the floor, shaking. They'd used my key. They'd stood in my space like they owned it. And for the first time in my life, I realized they didn't see me as a daughter or a sister. They saw me as property. I stood, walked to the kitchen, and placed the spare key on the counter. I stared at it for a long time before whispering, never again. That night, I changed the locks. And as the locksmith worked, I caught my reflection in the window. Calm face, cold eyes. That was the moment I stopped being their obedient daughter. That was the moment I became someone they couldn't control. For a few quiet days, I thought it was over. The new locks were in place. I could finally work again without flinching at every sound from the hallway. Then I made the mistake of opening social media. Ethan had posted a photo of a soft gray nursery mood board. Cribs, plush elephants, pale curtains. The caption read, "So grateful to my sister Julia for opening her home to me and my baby. Couldn't ask for a better aunt. Hashtag family first. Hashtag baby. On the way." Hundreds of likes. Dozens of comments from relatives and family friends. Julia, you're such an angel. That baby is so lucky to have you. Your parents raised you right. I stared at the screen, nauseated. My phone buzzed again. A tag notification. Mom had shared the post to her Facebook timeline. Our daughter Julia is the best. The nursery at her place is coming together beautifully. Can't wait to meet our grandbaby there. My heart pounded. I hadn't agreed to any of this, but now the entire family thought I had. Every word of denial would sound like a lie against their perfect image of me. I texted Ethan. Take that post down, immediately, he replied within seconds. Why? Everyone's being so supportive. It's nice to have good news for once. Good news. Breaking into my apartment and redecorating my life was good news now. That night, I lay awake, replaying every word from dinner, every tone of guilt and manipulation. My parents had done this before, not breaking and entering, but bending truth until I doubted myself. They called it family loyalty. I now recognized it for what it really was: control. A week later, I got invited, or rather summoned, to Ethan's baby shower at my parents' house. I almost didn't go, but a small, hopeful part of me thought maybe they wanted to apologize. The moment I arrived, I knew I was wrong. Everyone smiled at me with that overly sweet warmth that hides pity. Patricia greeted me with open arms. There she is, the woman of the hour. What? I frowned. Don't play shy, sweetheart. Everyone's dying to see what you've done with the nursery. I froze. Excuse me? Before I could stop here, Ethan clapped his hands. Everyone, I have a special surprise for you. He connected his phone to the TV. The room dimmed and a video began to play. A familiar door appeared on the screen. My door. The camera panned across my guest room, or what used to be my office. Now the walls were painted mint green. A white crib stood by the window. The shelves I'd bought for work files were filled with diapers and stuffed animals. My chair, my desk, gone. And there in the middle of it all was Ethan, rubbing his belly, smiling softly at the camera. This is where our baby will grow up, he said. Thanks to my amazing sister Julia for making this possible. Applause erupted around me. Patricia's face glowed with pride. Isn't it perfect? I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My pulse was roaring in my ears. When I finally found my voice, it came out sharp and low. You broke into my apartment, again. The laughter around us faltered. Patricia turned to me, still smiling, but with an edge of warning. Don't exaggerate. We had a key made. For convenience. I felt the room tilt. You had a key made? Well, you changed the locks, she said, shrugging. How else were we supposed to finish the nursery? The word finish echoed like a gunshot. I stepped back, reaching for my phone. You trespassed. You vandalized my property. That's a crime. Dad's voice was calm, almost pitying. Julia, please, don't embarrass yourself in front of everyone. Ethan started crying. Real tears or performance, I couldn't tell. You're ruining this. You're ruining everything. The guests shifted uncomfortably. Someone whispered, maybe she's overwhelmed. That's when I walked out, straight into the front yard, and I called the police. The dispatcher hesitated when I said it was my family, but eventually agreed to send officers to check my apartment. When I went back inside, Patricia cornered me in the kitchen. Where did you go? You're missing the crib assembly video. I met her eyes. You broke into my home, again. Don't be dramatic, Julia, she said softly. You've always had a flair for that. I left, again. When the officers and I arrived at my apartment, I braced myself, but nothing could have prepared me. Everything was real. The paint, the furniture, the photos. Even a framed picture of me and Ethan had been placed on the dresser, like I'd blessed this madness. My desk was shoved into my bedroom closet, files bent and papers crushed. One officer muttered, "They really went all out." The other glanced at me. "You sure you don't want to file charges?" I hesitated. "They're my family." He nodded slowly. "Then at least document everything. You'll need a record. This won't stop." They were right. I could feel it in my bones. When I changed the locks again that night, the silence in the apartment was unbearable. Even the air felt violated, heavy with paint fumes and lies. I sat in the corner of my stripped-down office, hugging my knees, and whispered, "What have they done to me?" The security camera I'd ordered arrived 2 days later. When I installed it by the door, I caught my reflection in the black lens, hollow-eyed but determined. And for the first time, I said it out loud. They've declared war. The next morning, my phone was already blowing up. Patricia had called 8 times. Ethan, 12. Texts from relatives poured in, all versions of the same thing. "Julia, how could you call the cops on your own family? Your mother is heartbroken. Ethan is humiliated. He's pregnant, for God's sake." No one cared that they'd invaded my home. The story had already been rewritten, and I was the villain. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my laptop and started looking up lawyers. By noon, I had a consultation scheduled. It was time to stop defending myself and start protecting myself. By Wednesday, the situation somehow managed to get worse. I got a call from my landlord, Mr. Jensen. "Julia, I just received a request from your parents about adding Ethan to your lease," he said, his voice cautious. "They also offered to pay an additional deposit for what they called Expected baby wear and tear. Is there something I should know? I nearly dropped my coffee. They did what? He sighed. They said you'd agreed to let your brother move in with the baby, but I figured I should confirm before doing anything. I'm assuming that's not the case. No, I said firmly. That's absolutely not the case. He exhaled. Thought so. Don't worry, I'll deny the request. But Julia, they also implied you've been acting irrational lately. Something about stress or paranoia. My stomach turned. They're trying to discredit me. Yeah, he said gently. Just document everything, all right? That afternoon, I installed the new security cameras, one outside my door, one in the living room. When the red light blinked on, I felt something I hadn't in months. Safety. A few days later, I visited Ethan at the hospital. He'd gone into labor 2 weeks early, and despite everything, I couldn't ignore that he was my brother. I brought flowers and a small stuffed elephant, the same one he'd once said would look perfect in my apartment. He smiled weakly when I walked in. Hey, Jules, you came. Of course, I said, though my voice felt mechanical. Mom was there, hovering beside his bed. The air between us was sharp enough to cut. Your niece is beautiful, she said, holding the baby out just slightly, but not offering her to me. We named her Olivia. That's a lovely name, I managed. Then Ethan's voice trembled. Is everything ready at your place? I can't wait to bring her home. I froze. Ethan, we've talked about this. You're not moving into my apartment. His smile faltered. But Mom said... Patricia turned, her tone icy. Julia, your brother just gave birth. This isn't the time for your selfishness. No, I said quietly. This is exactly the time to be clear. The argument escalated fast. Tears, raised voices, a nurse stepping in to ask us to lower our volume. I walked out before I said something I couldn't take back. The next 3 days were a blur of manipulation. They tried everything. First, emotional guilt. You're abandoning Ethan when he needs you most. Do you want the baby to grow up without stability? Then social pressure. Your aunt says she can't believe you do this to your family. Then public humiliation. Ethan posted a photo of Olivia with the caption, Can't wait to bring my baby home. Thank you, Aunt Julia, for giving us a place to start. The comments were relentless. People called me a hero. I felt like screaming the truth, but part of me knew. The more I defended myself, the more unhinged I'd look. And then came the final act. It was a Friday night. I came home late from work, exhausted. As I turned the corner to my hallway, I froze. Ethan was sitting on the floor outside my apartment. The baby carrier was beside him, and little Olivia was wailing. Diaper bags and suitcases surrounded them like props in a stage scene. Ethan, I breathed, what are you doing here? He looked up, red-eyed, trembling. Mom and Dad kicked me out. They said if you won't help family, then neither will they. We have nowhere else to go. Behind him, 2 neighbors were watching from their doors. One of them, Mrs. Chen, an elderly woman who'd always bake me cookies during holidays. She was glaring at me like I was the monster in this story. Your brother's been out here an hour, she snapped, and that baby's freezing. I knew this was staged. It reeked of Patricia's strategy. Emotional spectacle. Public guilt. Ethan, I said softly, get up. I'll drive you back to Mom and Dad's. They won't let me in, he cried. They said I need to learn what it's like to be alone. I called Dad. He answered immediately, suspiciously fast. Dad, what is this? Well, sweetheart, his voice was calm, almost smug. You've made it clear that family doesn't help family. We're just following your example. You kicked your son out with a newborn, I said, shaking. In the background, I heard Patricia whisper something, and then Dad's tone changed. Maybe this will make you realize what you've done. That was it. I hung up. And right there, in front of Ethan, the baby, and my horrified neighbors, I called 911. Hello, I said, my voice steady. I need police assistance. My brother is refusing to leave my apartment building. He's claiming to be homeless with an infant, and I believe this is a domestic dispute and potential child endangerment situation. Ethan's eyes widened in disbelief. Julia, what are you doing? I'm ending this, I whispered. The police arrived within 10 minutes. They listened, watched, and quickly saw through the act. One officer turned to Ethan. Sir, do you have a place to stay? Ethan sniffled. My parents' house. So you're not homeless? No, but... The officer's voice hardened. Then you need to leave this building. If you return without your sister's permission, you will be arrested for trespassing. Ethan's face crumpled. The baby started crying again. And just like that, the performance ended. As they led him out, Officer Williams turned to me. Ma'am, this won't stop until you make it stop. Get a restraining order. Tonight. I nodded. When the door finally closed behind them, the apartment was silent, except for my heartbeat. I glanced at the security camera monitor on my phone, a live feed from the hallway. For a moment, everything was still. Then the elevator doors opened. Patricia stepped out, her face pale and unreadable. She walked to my door and raised her hand, not to knock, but to rest it against the wood, fingers splayed like a silent promise. Then she whispered something I couldn't hear, and walked away. That night I didn't sleep at all. I just watched the red recording light blink again and again until sunrise. After that night, silence felt dangerous. Days passed with no calls, no messages, no unexpected knocks, and that terrified me more than any confrontation ever had. Because in my family, quiet was never peace. It was preparation. The first strike came in the form of a thick, cream-colored envelope, certified mail, legal letterhead. I tore it open and felt my stomach drop. Plaintiffs, Robert and Patricia Thompson. Defendant, Julia Thompson. They were suing me. The claims were absurd: breach of oral contract, unjust enrichment, intentional infliction of emotional distress. According to the document, I had verbally agreed to house Ethan and the baby. They claimed to have spent nearly $20,000 furnishing the nursery, and now wanted full reimbursement, plus damages. $47,000 in total. I actually laughed. It was too surreal not to. Then I picked up the phone and called Kevin, my lawyer. His chuckle was low and calm. They're bluffing. This is textbook manipulation. We'll counter. And we did. Breaking and entering, vandalism, harassment, defamation. My countersuit listed every trespass, every invasion, every recorded threat. For the first time, I wasn't defending myself. I was fighting back. But the war didn't stay private. The lawsuit split the family like glass under pressure. Aunts, cousins, and even old neighbors started taking sides. Half believed my parents' version, that I'd cruelly abandoned a helpless brother and newborn. The other half saw through it, whispering that Patricia and Robert had finally gone too far. The family group chat turned into a battleground. Long threads of moral lectures, guilt-tripping quotes about family unity, and photos of baby Olivia captioned, "Innocent victims of selfishness." One night, my cousin Michelle called me. Her voice was quiet. "Julia, I didn't believe you at first, but I went by Mom's house last week. The nursery they made there, it's empty. They never planned to keep Ethan at home. They always planned to put him in your apartment." I closed my eyes. I know. Then came the twist no one expected. An unknown number flashed on my phone one afternoon. When I answered, a man's voice spoke carefully. "Hi, you don't know me, but my name's Tyler. I'm Ethan's ex, Olivia's father." I froze. "What do you want?" "I just want to talk, please. 15 minutes. We met at a coffee shop near my office. He looked exhausted, like someone who'd been erased from his own story. "I've been following what's happening," he said. "Your family's been posting a lot online, but here's what you should know. Ethan and your parents blocked me months ago. I offered to help. I even suggested we get an apartment together for the baby, but Ethan said he didn't need me, said he had a better arrangement." He opened his phone and showed me screenshots, messages between Ethan and my mother, dated months before the dinner incident. They'd been planning it, planning to move into my apartment long before I even knew the baby existed. It hit me like a tidal wave. The dinner announcement wasn't spontaneous. It was premeditated. Tyler continued softly, "I've filed for custody, not to take Olivia away, just to keep her safe. I might need your testimony about everything that's happened." I nodded, numb. "You'll have it." The next few weeks were chaos. Word of Tyler's custody filing reached my parents like wildfire. They accused me of betrayal, of conspiring with an outsider. Mom sent a voice message dripping with venom. "You've turned on your family for a stranger. I hope you can live with that, Julia." Then came the guilt texts from Ethan. "You're tearing us apart. Olivia deserves stability, not courtrooms. You're supposed to love us." I blocked him. The restraining order hearing came shortly after. I showed the judge the videos, the photos, the delivery receipts, the messages. When the footage of Patricia's hand pressed against my door played, the courtroom went silent. The judge's voice was firm. "This is not family conflict. This is harassment." Restraining orders were granted against Patricia, Robert, and Ethan. They were forbidden from contacting or approaching me within 500 feet. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt hollow. I'd won, but at what cost? The people who raised me now sat across from me in court, refusing to meet my eyes. The brother I'd once held as a newborn now looked at me like a stranger, and little Olivia, innocent in all of this, was the only one I couldn't stop thinking about. A month later, my lawyer called with news. "The lawsuit from your parents has been dismissed with prejudice," he said, his tone triumphant. "Judge called it frivolous." I exhaled shakily. But then he added, "Julia, there's something else. Tyler's lawyer submitted those text logs. Turns out your parents were manipulating him too. They told him he wasn't welcome around the baby. The custody judge didn't take that well." I sat in silence, realizing the empire of control they'd built had finally started to crumble. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and stood in my freshly repainted office. Pale ivory walls, new curtains, my desk back in its place. Outside, the city lights blinked like quiet witnesses to the storm that had finally passed. On the desk lay a single envelope. No return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Ethan. I didn't open it, not yet. Instead, I whispered into the empty room. For the first time in years, this space belongs to me again. 3 months later, the final rulings came down. I remember standing in the courthouse hallway, clutching my lawyer's folder as he read the judgment aloud. His voice sounded distant, almost unreal, like it belonged to a different story. Tyler was granted joint custody of baby Olivia. The judge cited a pattern of emotional instability and boundary violations in Ethan's home environment. Hearing that felt like justice, not because Ethan lost something, but because Olivia had gained stability. My parents' lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice. The judge actually used the words bad faith and manipulation. Then she ordered them to pay my legal fees, $15,000. Kevin smiled at me. "You won, Julia." But my first reaction wasn't relief. It was disbelief, the kind you feel when a storm finally stops, and you realize you've been holding your breath the whole time. A few weeks later, the countersuit settled. They agreed to pay $32,000 for property damage, emotional distress, and legal costs. I didn't even care about the money. It wasn't compensation. It was closure, proof that what they did was real and wrong. The restraining orders were the final line drawn. For the next 2 years, Patricia, Robert, and Ethan were legally forbidden from coming within 500 feet of me, my apartment, or my office. When the judge read that condition aloud, Mom's face went pale. For the first time in my life, she looked powerless. The aftermath was quieter than I expected. Family gatherings imploded. Half the relatives cut contact with my parents entirely. Aunt Sarah called them a cautionary tale. Cousin Michelle told me that Thanksgiving at their house was practically empty. Just Mom, Dad, and Ethan, sitting in silence, pretending nothing was wrong. Word spread. So did the truth. Stories from years ago began resurfacing about favors, manipulation, emotional blackmail. It was as if my family's entire reputation had cracked open and everyone was finally seeing the rot beneath the surface. I didn't gloat. I didn't even speak about it publicly. I was done fighting. In the quiet that followed, I started to rebuild. I began therapy. The first session, I couldn't even say the words abuse or gaslighting, but my therapist helped me trace the patterns, how guilt was used as currency, how family love always came with conditions, how saying no was treated like betrayal. I learned that boundaries aren't cruelty, they're protection. For months, my apartment became my sanctuary again. I repainted the guest room, this time pure white. Not sterile, but free. I put my desk back by the window, rehung my certificates, planted a tiny succulent that I jokingly named Freedom. Sometimes I'd catch myself working late into the night, listening to the city hum. No crying babies, no pounding at the door, just peace. And yet, every so often, I'd glance at the unopened envelope on my shelf, Ethan's letter. One rainy afternoon, I finally opened it. The handwriting was messy, shaky, like it had been written in tears. "Julia, I know you have no reason to trust me. I don't even know if I have the right to call you my sister anymore. I was scared. I let Mom and Dad control everything because it was easier than facing my mistakes. I thought if I went along with their plan, things would somehow fix themselves. You were the only one brave enough to stop them. I hated you for it because you forced me to see the truth. I'm in therapy now. So is Mom, believe it or not. Court-ordered, but still. Dad barely talks. Olivia's with Tyler half the time, and honestly, she's happy there. He's a good father. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed you to know that I finally understand what you did. And thank you." Ethan. I read it twice. Then I cried. not because of pain, but because of release. That night, I stood in my living room, staring at the security monitor. The camera light still blinked, my quiet reminder that I was safe. I whispered to the empty air. They thought they could repaint my life the way they painted those nursery walls. Then I smiled, small but real. But this is my home, my peace, my story. I turned off the monitor, sat down at my desk, and opened a blank document. The same one I'd been too afraid to start for months. Title, Boundaries. Subtitle, A Story About Family, Control, and the Price of Freedom. Outside, the rain softened. Inside, I typed the first words that felt entirely mine. Sometimes the people who teach you about love are the ones who force you to learn about survival. And for the first time in a long, long while, I felt free.